So I've hit a wall. I burnt out this weekend, and in hindsight, I feel like I probably should have seen this coming at some point during the project. The TLDR was 2 weekends ago. I had spent 16 hours just grinding, working through all the projects. I finished the first draft of the essay, as well as prepared the presentation and what I wanted to say for a speaking event that I was a part of for Friday. And after the weekend was finished, I spent the weekdays practicing the speech. And then on Friday, I went to the event and I gave the speech. Now, I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the speech and how that went, maybe in the future, because they did take some videos and pictures. So hopefully, when they come, can talk a little bit more about it. But I met some amazing people, had a great time, heard a lot of amazing speeches, and I think the speech went over pretty well. But I distinctly remember after finishing the speech and going to sleep Friday evening and waking up on Saturday, um, I felt quite tired. And this is something that probably a lot of us have gone through, like being tired, like that doesn't feel like too much. So I just went about my day, even though I was tired, and I tried getting some work done. And the main goal, I guess, for that day was to finish the video because usually what I do is I make the videos during the weekdays after work, and I spend the weekends kind of really focusing on the projects that I'm trying to work on. However, that week specifically, since I had the event, I moved making the video to Saturday. So the goal was to finish the video, obviously. And to be honest, I really tried. I had two separate drafts of totally different ideas on Saturday of how I wanted the video to go. Both of them, I finished recording them. I had scripts for both of them. But in the end, both just didn't seem to click. I just didn't feel like it was good enough, or just it was really what I wanted to post. And I think the first symptom, or the first time I was aware of the fact that I was probably burnt out, was that on 5 p.m. on Saturday, I felt very tired and I decided to take a nap. And when I woke up, it was 3 hours later. It was 8 p.m. And that is not the best way to spend your weekend, especially since it totally ruins your sleep schedule if you're sleeping like that late and waking up at like 8 p.m. But once that had happened, I at first wasn't willing to admit I was burnt out, to be honest. So I was like, okay, it's fine. Saturday happened, but it's okay. So I have Sunday. So Sunday rolls around and I start doing work again, but I just really can't get anything done. So at that point, I am pretty frustrated, obviously. But I think one thing that I do kind of credit myself with is I decided to take a walk. So this was probably Sunday evening. I'd go outside, take a walk around this area that I kind of live in. And I remember sitting close to this old building. And at some point, I read there was this piece of stone that had a little bit of writing on it, and it was introducing what the building was. And apparently, it was one of the largest armories that they had in back in World War II. I'm not exactly sure what an armory is. I should have probably searched this up before I recorded, but let's see. Okay, an armory is a facility used to store arms, ammunition, and military equipment. So yeah, so basically, largest armory in World War II, at least one of the largest armories. And I was reading about it, and I guess the type A in me kind of started thinking about like the soldiers, and how they fought so hard and they went through so much, obviously. And here I was unable to do a project that I wanted to do in my own volition, that I had basically the freedom and the ability to do, which was something that these soldiers did not have a choice at all in, right? They went through so much harder, infinitely harder things than I did. And here I was feeling burnt out, unable to do something what seemingly, at least comparatively, simpler and easier to do. And obviously, not a very healthy mindset, but I feel like for a lot of people that are very ambitious, that really care about achieving their goals, perhaps that thought might resonate. But there's always that idea of people in the past, they did so much. They were able to accomplish so many things. They sacrificed so much. They went through so much more than we did. And how can I mess something so easy up? Or how can I not be able to do something that seems comparatively easier? And I remember thinking about this as I was sitting there, and I don't know, I started thinking a little bit more about it. And at some point, I started imagining what I would be saying to this soldier, or like what this hypothetical soldier would be saying to me. And this is a very weird hypothetical. I don't know if I should even post this. I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens. But I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about my interaction with this hypothetical soldier. And in that moment, I realized they probably wouldn't have looked down on me. And in fact, why did I even believe that they would kind of look down on me? Because in many ways, as I thought about it a little bit more, wasn't that kind of the reason they fought? The reason that they fought was for future generations to have freedom so that we wouldn't have to go through what they went through. And there's this perpetual idea, I guess, that since, oh, other people have sacrificed things for us, we should go through suffering. We should bite the bullet and go through whatever we're going through because it can't compare to what they went through. But in another lens, I think the reason why they went through that much and the whole motivation for them was so we can be able to have an easier life, to be able to do these random projects and explore, and to be able to feel burnt out and to acknowledge that and give us a chance to kind of focus on ourselves and make sure we are doing okay. Like that was the whole reason they probably fought, right? I don't know. I think that was just kind of like a random thought I had that evening. But I think that the more I thought about it, I was like, obviously, I don't want to just give up on this project or like just not do anything. And that's not what I want to do at all, right? But I think at the same time, it's so important to think a little bit more about these things and acknowledge the fact that I was indeed burnt out. And I don't want this video to be something that's like, oh, I was burnt out. Oh, it's okay. Pat, pat, and then like continue on with my life and have that be the video. Because I think there's something important to be learned from the fact that I did burn out. Because on one hand, like why was I burnt out on a project that I wanted to do, and it was on happiness too, ironically. Like why was I feeling burnt out on that? And the more I thought about it, I feel like I kept coming back to this one thing that I actually had learned from one of the speakers on Friday at the speaking event that I went to. And it was how the easiest questions to always answer will be the ones that start with what. The hardest ones are the ones that start with why. And I think going into this project and feeling this burnout and kind of coming not out of it, I guess. I don't know if I'm out of it yet, but kind of becoming burnt out and realizing that I was burnt out. I started realizing that so much of this project has been the what, right? And if you look at any of the videos before this, it is all about what I did that weekend, this and that I'm trying to accomplish, but it's never really the why. And I've never really talked about too much of the why. And I think that is something that's so important that I hadn't really talked about, and maybe perhaps hadn't even thought too much about. Now, the simple one-liner for why I want to do this is to create more conversations around happiness. That's kind of what I've been telling myself throughout. But I think when I compare this part of the project with the initial motivations for myself to make that documentary I made initially, which started this entire project, I think that lacks a little bit, because I remember the motivation for that first initial documentary came from the fact that I wanted to know what made me happy. And I wanted to take such a great opportunity being in China to really write that into words and to be able to kind of be in the moment in a way that I feel like only writing can make you do. Because writing oftentimes pushes you to reevaluate moments you've lived in, to rethink them. And not only that, it helps you to reframe the way you think and approach moments in a different way. When you write about past moments and you realize these new things, you're more cognizant of what you should be thinking about, what you should be watching out for future moments. So, yeah. So that was kind of the motivation of the documentary. And obviously I ended up making the documentary, but predominantly it was about kind of those journal entries, learning about what made me happy, and kind of documenting those memories and being able to be more in the present. I think that motivation was really good, and it was very telling because I ended up writing a lot during that time. But coming into this second phase, I think even from the plans I started out with for this project, a lot of it was just the what, kind of what exactly I want to achieve, but less the why. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly beyond kind of that one-liner I gave as to why I want to do a lot of this. Obviously, I enjoy the different projects I'm doing. I have a lot of fun doing them. But beyond that, why I want to pursue these projects, I feel like I should do a little bit more thinking. Now, obviously, from the time I burnt out to now, as recording, it is Thursday, so it's been a couple of days. I think I've been able to think a little bit more about it, but I think I still need more time in terms of thinking about where this project exactly will go. However, I will leave you with this, which is something that I feel like has been underlying this entire project. And I was actually looking back at the old Notion pages I had for the Happiness Project initially, and this was one of the biggest motivations, which was I came across this article on the different archetypes you can be in relationships. And if you're a close friend of mine, I might have sent you this article before, but basically there's this idea that people start off as 3 certain archetypes going into relationships, which are not the most healthy. The first one is being a rescuer, the other one is being a perpetrator, and the last one is being a victim. Hello, this is Editing Warren here, and in the video I say perpetrator, but what I meant to say was persecutor. And so the 3 archetypes are rescuer, persecutor, and victim. And I think this is a good time to also flag that I don't claim to be very knowledgeable in psychology. This is just an article that I read. I highly encourage you guys to read into it. I'll link it in the description below. But definitely take a little bit of what I said with a grain of salt. But yeah, back to the video. The 3 archetypes are rescuer, persecutor, and victim going into these relationships. And I promise you, it'll all make sense in the end. It doesn't really make sense right now, but I'll kind of connect it later on. But essentially, in the article, the archetype I resonated the most with was the rescuer, the person who finds a lot of their value in helping others. And while on face, this seems like a very good archetype to have, I think for a lot of people that end up being that archetype, it can be very emotionally destructive if we base our entire value on how much we can help people and how we aren't able to find value in the own things that we do or just finding value internally, right? And I think from reading that article, I was able to spot that, especially from the start. And what I wanted to do was, I didn't want to not become someone that helps others, because obviously I think fundamentally that's a good thing to do. But I want to be a healthier version of that archetype. And although the article doesn't cover too much about the healthier version of the archetype, there are other kind of sources that do, which is to, instead of being a rescuer, to become a mentor or to become a teacher, someone that's able to help others find the help they need themselves and be able to help themselves. So not like, it's kind of like that saying, if you give a man a fish, they will always come. If you give a man a fish, they will always, wait, I forgot the exact saying. Give me 1 second. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. And I think that's the crux of what a healthy way of helping others is versus perhaps maybe a more unhealthy way, right? To not be giving pieces of you to feed someone else, but rather to be using your skills, using your knowledge to teach others how to feed themselves. And I think in part with this project, the larger goal of this second phase is to be able to communicate that, to be able to help others in a certain way where they're able to have the motivation or to read something that I wrote, to see something that I filmed or whatever, but to see this thing that I bring into the world and be motivated to learn about their own happiness, to speak about their own happiness, and to actually think about their own happiness. And I think broadly that was the final goal of the documentary as well, but also it's more so the bigger goal for this phase of the project. Now, there is a very big note to put here, which is that I don't claim to know all the answers. In fact, I probably know less answers than the average person about happiness, given that I literally burnt out on a project that I wanted to do myself. But I think learn along with people and along the way of my learning. If other people see that journey and they feel motivated to think more about their own happiness, then I would say that's what the why behind this project actually is. Now, I think that there's more depth that I want to talk about in the future that I probably, frankly, have not even thought of yet. But for now, I think the broad direction of this project is to provide people with the space, with encouragement to think about these things. And as for each singular project and how that has their own motivations, have their own whys, I think I'll need to take a little bit more time to think about that. But yeah, I know I think I said something like one last thing, but there is one last thing on top of the one last thing, which is that I think yesterday was kind of there was an inkling of realization in terms of at least one of the projects of the why behind it. And the reason why I wanted to do that project, I think, was made a little bit more clear to me, at least yesterday, which was the literary essay project. Because Um, I don't think I talked too much about what I actually ended up writing, but a lot of it was about my trip in China from last year. And I don't know why this never occurred to me at all, but yesterday I was calling my grandparents and I finally told them about this thing I was writing, which was kind of about them as well and about my experiences in China. And I was talking to my grandpa about the thing I wrote. Um, and I think in that moment when I was able to talk to him about it, show him what I had done, I think that was a very nice realization for me because I think I remember asking him about a certain specific part of the writing I've been doing that I was a little bit stuck on. I was trying to talk about the childhood stories he told me, and I was trying to illustrate that a little bit better into the essay. And I didn't know how, so I asked him about it. And I just remember in that moment, he told me those stories once again. And there were some stories that I even forgot about. And when he told me those stories, I feel like I realized why I wanted to write these things in the first place. Because, like what I've mentioned earlier with kind of writing in general, I think it's a great way of processing memories and seeing them in a different light. It's one of the best ways you're able to do that. And I think this literary essay, the larger part of it, is being able to just recount those memories in such an in-depth level. I was literally like, as you can probably maybe have seen in the past videos, I spent a lot of time thinking and just reminiscing about those memories. So that in of itself is quite enjoyable. But I think on top of that, listening to my grandpa's stories, I just knew how much they impacted me as a person and how much they improved me as a person and who I am now. And I think those stories were just so valuable that I think they're just so worth sharing to people and that people should know more about these stories because they're just amazing. And I think that is kind of a little bit of the motivation I got for that one project. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, I don't have all of this figured out. I burnt out a few days ago, so I don't know the why behind this project in its entirety. But I think that was a really good example of kind of taking a step back, thinking more about less the what and the why, and kind of the result of that, right? And I think going into the writing now, I have a little bit more motivation in terms of the direction I want to take it because I genuinely know the why. And maybe unconsciously, I do know the whys. And probably the reason why I'm able to still do, to a certain extent, a lot of this project is because I kind of unconsciously know the whys. And a lot of this happens in my head, but I don't talk about it as much. And I think being able to voice those things, bring it to the top of my mind, I think that will help me A, kind of overcome this burnout, but also B, help me find the right direction for this project. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't even know if I'm gonna post it or not, but if you're watching it and you're not me, I guess I did end up posting it. But I know I've been recording and yapping for the past 30 minutes, so I am excited to see how I end up cutting this video. But if you stayed to the end, this is probably a little bit of a longer video as well, so I really appreciate that, and I'll catch you in the next one.